Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to our Thankful Thursday interview. I'm Jamie, and I am so excited to get to introduce you to our Soul to Sisterhood goddess, Mindy. I got to meet Mindy a few years ago. She and I were kind of in touch back and forth about some Valentine's Day groups that I was offering. And I tell you what, you ever have that moment when you meet somebody and just instantly you know you're going to have like a zillion things in common? That's how my friendship has been with this beautiful sister, because every time we get together, it's like we can't wait to keep talking and talking and talking. We've got so much to share with each other and so much to just experience with each other. So Mindy's story is one that goes right to the heart of motherhood and birthing and mothering our children and what that looks like in extreme circumstances and situations. And she also gives us so much wisdom and hope through her perseverance and her ability to cope and survive. And not only that, but just thrive and to share her wisdom and share her experiences to become really of service to others. And after you watch this, I promise you are probably going to want to get in touch with her and say, lady, you inspired me, which is what my hope is for all of our Soul to Sisterhood interviews and stories and for this entire project. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Miss Mindy. Hey, Mindy, how's it going, baby?
Hi. Going well.
I love your glasses.
Thank you. Purple, of course. My fave.
Well, you wear them well. That's why I've got my glasses on in honor of Mindy, because when I first met you, had some turquoise ones that were amazing. And they had
Yes.
silver on the sides. And then I love those. And I love your beautiful sunglasses that have the mirror on them too. It's awesome.
Yep.
So Mindy, you were told at a young age that you might never have children.
I was 18 years old when I was told I might not ever have children because of a pretty gnarly cyst they thought I had. Turned out, though, after the surgery, it was not the type of cyst that they thought it was, which could grow hair and bone and teeth even and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I was able to keep my ovaries.
Wow. And here you are, a mama of 4.
4. Yes. One's almost 21 December 2nd.
How
And
is
then
that possible when you're only like 27 and a half?
yeah, right. I'll be 42 July 5th.
Oh, that's right. We're
Hard
both
to believe.
got that. We're both cancers. No wonder we have so much to talk about all the time.
Yeah, totally.
My grandma's birthday is July 5th.
My grandma, really? My grandma was July 28th.
Wow.
No, 29th. The other sister's the 28th.
There you go.
Yep.
Well, you have such an interesting story when it comes to the way that your body carried your children and your birth experiences. Is it okay with you if we start with your oldest?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay, so when I first met you, one of the stories you told me was about your oldest's birth and the subsequent diagnosis that she had after that extremely traumatic experience. Would you share with our ladies that are watching this what that was like and what happened?
well, it was devastating. I mean, no mother wants to hear anything negative or derogatory about their baby's health once that baby comes out. I mean, aside from the whole birth being just absolutely traumatic, it was very upsetting, and it just kind of knocked the wind right out of you. So I had no idea what they were talking about when they said Erb's palsy, you know. They were actually hoping that she just had a broken arm. All the nurses, we'll get her in for an X-ray and everything, and we'll just see. We'll see what's going to happen. So I wasn't really being told much until the final diagnosis, and then when we went further and found out more, after going through the process of all children's and really learning exactly what it was going to entail for the rest of her life. It was, well, it took me a year to get out of the black hole that I found myself in, which
You were very young.
did not help my marriage at all at that time,
Right.
because I don't think either one of us knew how to deal with it either. I was 21 years old. when that happened too, so it was
Can
it
you?
was devastating.
I I can't imagine.
But so when the doctor pulled her out, it was so much force because she had used, because I was in and out of um, consciousness. And when they were pulling her, I guess the doctor, from what my ex-husband said, literally put her foot up on the table to pull her out. But we believe it was the suction that was probably doing most of the damage when they use that suction. I don't really know. I don't know. I always blamed myself for the longest time too, because, I wasn't really with it. And I only allowed the one person to come in the room with me, and even my mother kind of said, you should have let me come in the room. But, you know,
So I can understand why, you look inward just for
I have a
some
lot of blame.
answer.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, because there's nothing out there to point the finger at. So pointing the finger inward makes sense. Not that you deserve that in any way, but I can understand why that would have seemed like the only option.
And not only her arm was affected, she had the whole side of her the right of, it would almost look like she had a stroke. When somebody has a stroke and it just sags, her, everything. And then she had this big, like jelly spot on the top of her head, and it was like cone shaped from that suction and everything. So yeah, her arm was completely limp. I had to pin it. I remember going down to the little gift shop when I was in the hospital and finding a cute little pin to pin on
Hmm.
her because you didn't want it to, flop,
You
but
see
yeah,
what the medical diagnosis of Erb's palsy is?
it's the braid of nerves that connects right in through here. Okay, that's the Erb's palsy. Brachial plexus is another word for it. And so when those, like, it's sort of like a bowl of spaghetti. So like, if you will, you picture you've got C1 and C2 and all these different nerves, right? B1, and it goes, I mean, there's just a plethora of nerves in there. And when what happened was she was caught on my pelvic bone. So every time the suction was happening, every time I was being told to push, every time, she's just getting more and more damage. That braid is just being stretched and stretched and stretched. And when we went to All Children's and the neurologists, and we went through and they did everything to see exactly how much damage it was, severed nerves. I mean, they were just completely severed. The ones that were stretched, there was a possibility that could kind of come back, and she would regain some sense, sensory or movement. But a lot of them were severed. It was a pretty bad injury. Even the neuro specialist said, this is the worst case I've ever seen, off the record, and you should get legal advice.
Wow. And what did the doctor tell you when you were in the hospital? The list of nevers that your daughter would never do.
Oh, yes, that was a specialist that worked at the hospital. I think she was probably assigned for any parent who had any kind of, something that needed to be explained, to a parent. But yeah, she came in and went on to tell me how Mina would never have the use of her right arm, never be able to play the piano, never be able to do all kinds of different things. I mean, she just went down. The piano is sort of what stuck in my head. I don't know why, because she just went through an array of different things that she'd never be able to do. And I remember becoming upset and telling her I've heard enough and that she could leave my room now. Because I remember thinking to myself, how do you know she's never going to do any of those things?
Yeah. And what about today? Tell us about Mina today.
Well, she's getting ready to start Flagler College. So we're all super stoked about that. Already planning 2 trips to St. Augustine, her Aunt Amy and I, to come see her. And she's thriving. I mean, she does a lot. with that arm. She really makes up for not having full function. We did have surgery when she was 5 months old, although sometimes I'm not sure that really did much of anything, but she can kind of move it a little bit, this way, if you could see what, and then the wrist kind of a little bit. Shouldn't have any mobility in the hand. She can't pick anything up or anything, but she still uses her arm, for other things, and totally makes up for it. And Mina's such a great person to be around. She's such a great listener, and unique and beautiful, and a lot of people don't even notice. They don't even notice. They can sit there and talk to her for hours and didn't even notice.
Wow.
So
She sounds a lot like you.
well, thank you. She looks just like me. There's no denying she's mine. That's for sure. We get that all the time.
Oh.
She's your clone. Holy crap, she looks just like you. Or Tina, you look just like your mom.
What a compliment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Mina's kind of proud of being a lot like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, your next two pregnancies, you said in your story, and I know because we've talked about this a lot, were almost ideal, right? Except for the gestational diabetes with your son.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
That was just depressing because, denying a mother her chocolate cake when she's pregnant, it's like, I can remember crying. We were at a restaurant and I wanted eggs and pancakes so bad, but I had to order the salad, and I just started to cry. And my husband goes, "What's wrong? What? And I'm like, I want the pancakes." You want what you want when you're pregnant.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the only hang up with that.
Well, going into the birth with your second eldest, your other daughter, what was going through your mind in regards to your previous experience? How did you prepare yourself?
I was scared to death. When I first found out I was pregnant, I was actually thrilled because I had had 3 miscarriages, 2 blighted ovums, and 1 actual loss before I got pregnant with Kylie. So, but when, we talked about, because the doctor, I found a really cool doctor who I bonded with beautifully, still love her. We're still friends today. But she was like, "Do you want to try to do natural again, or do you want to just go straight to a C-section?" And I said, "Let's do a C-section." I was way too scared to even go there. There was no way I was even going to try.
Yeah. And did that feel empowering to be able to make that choice?
Yes, definitely. And I was very confident in the doctor who I was connected with, and happy that I had found her. I actually got denied by another doctor because of, I think, the lawsuits from Mina's birth.
Wow.
And being high risk, what they referred to as high risk pregnancy. Right.
Mm-hmm. So you went through your other 2 pregnancies crying at IHOP over not getting the pancakes.
Yeah.
And then it was your 4th was a bit of a surprise, right?
A bit of a surprise. Yeah. We weren't really, taking super precautions, but she was a bit of a surprise. And I was kind of delighted though, because Wyatt was so pretty, my second husband and we made some good looking kids, red hair, blue eyes, both of them. But yeah, I was excited to see what this next one would look like because of how pretty I thought Wyatt was.
Wow. And so the pregnancy was going along initially okay, and then tell us what happened.
At my first ultrasound, because I'm always considered high risk, so they usually do routine ultrasounds for me, and I remember the look on the technician's face, and I knew something wasn't right. So then, the doctor comes in, or I think we ended up going or it was just me, I think, for that one. I don't know. Anyway, she took me into another room where she discussed what they thought might be, an accreta. And that's where the placenta is aggressive and it adheres or attaches itself to the uterus. But it can become really aggressive and attach itself and invade your internal organs. Which of course is what I ended up having, because it's accreta, increta, or percreta. Percreta being the worst, where it invades the other organs. And it did invade my bladder, but they were able to do a bladder repair. So I was able to keep my bladder, luckily.
So what week were you? How many weeks pregnant were you at that appointment?
Well, I know I was probably not even 5 months yet. I must have been about 3 months along.
And what kind of
Or
prognosis
stuff.
did the doctor give you after saying, I suspect that it's this?
Well, they said that, well, I had to go for more routine ultrasounds closer together, because they had to keep a close watch on that. And well, because during the pregnancy, you can bleed out, a high risk of hemorrhaging, and that there was a possibility I'd have to be on bed rest or pelvic rest, all kinds of different things like that. I did end up being put on pelvic rest. I think I was 6 months along when they put me on pelvic rest. It was a while. And that was kind of tough, because now you've lost the intimacy with your partner, and that's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to connect in that way.
Well, yeah.
And, being able to come together, especially in such a terrifying time. When did you get the news that this pregnancy or this delivery could potentially kill you?
It was a little further on, once they actually knew what they thought they were dealing with, So it was closer towards, I think it was probably when they put me on pelvic rest, was around 6 months along. They knew that there was probably an invasion there and that it would be a pretty rigorous surgery, because they knew at that point they would have to do a hysterectomy. Yeah. A lot of women end up having to have a hysterectomy, but not all. Because if it's not so bad, then sometimes they can disconnect that placenta and salvage the uterus. So some women are lucky in that regard. But what was the other thing I was going to say? I lost my train of thought.
You're allowed. I do that all the time. Well, I was asking, because you talk about in your interview that in those final weeks of your pregnancy.
Yeah. Yes, the doctor had said, actually, I was at the doctor's appointment and he was reviewing the ultrasounds and he was saying, he says, I'm not going to lie to you and I'm not going to beat around the bush. This is life-threatening. And he says it just like that. He looks at me and he says, I'm scared. And he says, and I don't mean to scare you, but this is dangerous territory, and he's like, and he says, I'll be honest, he says, I've never delivered, a baby with what maybe we're dealing with. They were hoping that it wasn't necessarily as bad as maybe what it looked like, because they never really know until they cut you open exactly what they're dealing with. Those MRIs and the ultrasounds give them an idea, but they don't know till they get in there how severe or maybe not so severe it is. And so I had several specialists, because he didn't want to be alone to do the C-section and to go through the rest of it. Luckily, one of his colleagues had experience before with accreta births. So he had him. So he was on one side during the surgery, and then the other doctor. And then they brought in a specialist who specializes, I think, in cancer of the female parts.
Mhm.
And I think they brought him in because he would be more knowledgeable, I guess, as far as what you're looking at to disconnect, wherever that possibly invaded to the other organs,
Right.
you know. And the main reason it's high risk is the blood loss, because you can hemorrhage during the pregnancy, and that could be fatal, or you can just totally bleed out during the surgery
Mhm.
or birth. Not all women even know they have that going on. And so it ends up being like an emergency C-section, or the mom is lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, at that appointment, when the doctor said, "I don't mean to scare you," which
Yeah.
is so ironic. How could it not scare you? How could it not terrify you?
Well, they kept telling me, don't look stuff up on the internet. Yeah, right. So I totally looked it up online. So before he even told me that, I already knew, you know.
Mhm.
I'm just one of those that likes to be prepared. I don't want a shock. I don't want to, I've been through enough in my life. I kind of know to do a little research. So I was actually kind of pleased that he didn't beat around the bush.
Hmm.
To be honest, he was very straightforward, and I liked that. I like that about a person, you know.
Right.
And I actually really liked that he showed the concern, because then his concern made him want to seek the specialist to make sure that I was taken care of. So his honesty and his fear made me at ease, because
That's
I felt like I was going to get the care I needed.
that's
And
a
so
beautiful
would
way
my
to
baby.
think about it. You're right, and to put
Mhm.
that beautiful
Yeah.
positive spin on it, which is so you.
Yeah.
And so in your story, you said you left that appointment not knowing if you should live like you were dying or begin preparing to die.
Right. Well, when you read about, you do your research, you're doing that just to be prepared for what the doctor's going to say, and in your head, you're thinking, well, it's not going to be that severe. I'm going to think positive, and that's not going to happen to me. But of course, I left, yeah, not knowing whether to make a video for the kids just in case I was not going to be there, or just act like everything's going to turn out fine, and not, do something like that and set yourself up for, because I'm one of those that believes in what you put out in the universe, it does come back. So you try to be as positive as possible. But it was super scary. It was very stressful and scary, and to say the least, it had a very devastating effect on the marriage and even other relationships in my life, because I felt like I was on edge all the time. So I'd be kind of snappy or bitchy, you know, because you're just stressed to the max.
Understandable.
You know?
Understandable. Um, when you walked into the hospital to go to deliver your baby, um, what was that like? That
Well,
that
I didn't sleep the night before. There was no sleep the night before at all. And I probably really didn't get much sleep that whole week leading up to the scheduled C-section. I mean, I was trembling in the car getting there, trembling the whole time. And, I can remember my husband trying to keep me as calm as possible, but I could tell he was trembling himself, because he was scared. And at first, they weren't going to let him into the room because they used the main OR rather than the typical operating room that they would use for traditional C-sections. So there was like 21 people in there, and how intimidating is that when you get wheeled into the room and you're already scared? Okay, now we got 21 people in here. Oh my God, and then they strap you down. You feel like you're on a crucifix, after you get the epidural and everything, and it was very, very, very intimidating because I didn't know if I was going to wake up.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I was just going to drift right off, And I remember the anesthesiologist saying, at any point, if you feel like you're just getting too much anxiety or whatever, let me know and I'll give you a cocktail. So of course, as soon as they get me strapped down, I'm like, I'm gonna need that cocktail. And it wasn't long after she did that, because you immediately feel it, as soon as they put that in the IV. And I kind of went into this twilight state where I could still hear everything going on around me, but I was in a dream. And in that dream, I was holding a baby. And I could see her as plain and as clear. I mean, it was so real. And I could feel her. I mean, I could feel her. And I'm just cooing and talking to her like you do a baby, and calling her Lily and laughing with her, and she's smiling up at me. And then they called Michael in the room because he's all scrubbed up and ready, and they're getting me all prepped, for the C-section. And I said, because I didn't know what we were having, whether it was a boy or a girl. That was one cool thing that we had to look forward to with all the chaos of it and stress. And I looked up at Michael and I said, we're having a girl and her name's Lily.
Yeah, you talk about that vision is what really sustained you through the
I knew at
9
that
days.
point that I was going to survive. Somehow I knew. I met her already. And then when I actually got to hold her for the first time, it was her. That was her. It was amazing. I felt very special that I really feel like she introduced herself to me to put me at ease. Yeah. Because it was 3 days before I got to hold her in my arms. And she latched right on. She knew exactly who I was.
Wow.
Because I was afraid, she'd have trouble. Because I knew she was getting those bottles, and I was pumping in the ICU. I remember telling that nurse, I need to pump. Because I was, come hell or high water, I was going to breastfeed that baby. I did all my others, and I was going to breastfeed this one too. Darn it. And I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your surgery after Lily was delivered lasted another 8 hours, you said.
8 or 9. Yeah, it was 8+ hours awake for the whole shebang.
Wow.
Very traumatic. I can remember laying there, and the charge nurse said, Michael wants you to know that he's thinking of you, and he believes in you, and he knows you're strong, and he wants you to hear this song. And it was a Joan Jett song. I can't even think of the name of it, but it was one of those Joan Jett songs, and I remember chuckling. I can't even think of what it was now. But that gave me, a sense of comfort, and because you can hear everything they're saying, everything that's going on. Because the recycled blood, they had to get blood from the blood bank, and I remember them telling them, go get some more blood, get some more, and I can remember saying, are you almost done? Like the kid in the backseat of a car, are we there yet? It seemed like forever.
8 to 9 hours going through what you were going through is an eternity, sweetheart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
And so you were in the ICU for 3 days before you got to see Lily for the first time or second time.
I think I was in ICU, because they just held her up the first time. I didn't get to touch her because they had to immediately rush Michael out, the baby, to the NICU and get to doing, whatever they had to do. And I remember them saying too, God, where are we gonna, So that makes you wonder, oh God,
Right.
what am I going to have to deal with? Am I going to have to wear a colostomy bag? And I mean, because it can be pretty bad.
Right.
Some women go around wearing both bags the rest of their life because it's too far gone as far as how that's invaded. Ooh, one cool thing was when that came out, because I had the charge nurse taking pictures, because I wanted to see it, how that looked, the placenta, how it was attached. And it was like this one big mass. And I remember thinking when I saw the image, no wonder, because when the baby would move and stuff, I remember I would get pain and I'd have to just lay on one side, on the couch and just lay there until she kind of shifted another way. But I remember thinking, no wonder that felt so weird, because
Yeah.
it was like one big mass that was removed. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And then I got to donate it to her education, because that particular charge nurse, she was in charge of orchestrating that surgery, because she was training others in the hospital how to deal with accreta and increta and percreta and everything.
Wow.
Because there's some hospitals that are not going to be prepared. Sarasota Memorial was, and so luckily I had the doctor I had, and I had the team that I had, and they were prepared, beyond prepared, matter of fact. So, yeah.
Well, in the days of recovery, because Lily was actually in the hospital longer than you were, wasn't she?
13 days, I believe it was. I think I was 9 or 10 and she was 13.
You talk about in those days, just the darkness was almost consuming, but something that kept you going was that vision.
Yes, her vision certainly kept me going, because, the trauma to your body is just unbelievable. The feeling of like a bowl full of jelly, and, you got to pass that gas, and it's so hard to get up and walk, and you're just weak. You're totally weak, losing that amount of blood. It's just, I mean, I was sunken in. I probably looked totally different. I probably looked like death, because I can remember everybody that would come see me and be crying, because I looked pretty rough and I felt rough. I mean, and then I had an infiltration. As soon as I came out of the operating room, the one nurse said, we need whatever it was, stat, because there's a shot that they have to do to stop that infiltration from happening. And that's where the fluids from the IV and everything are not in the vein. They're going up in through. Could have lost my arm from that if that nurse hadn't caught that. And that was painful, that infiltration to heal from. You couldn't bend your wrist or nothing. And then I was totally bruised all over from the IVs and stuff, because I'm just one of those where they have a hard time finding the vein. So much so that they ended up turning my room, because I almost bled out again in the room, because they put me up with Mom and Babe after I got out of ICU, hoping that Lily would get out of the NICU and be able to be with me in the room. It didn't turn out that way. Not at all, because there was like a little bulb, if you've ever heard of that, whenever you have a major surgery like that, where it sucks the extra blood and stuff out. Well, it started to bleed around where the tube was that went in to the abdomen. And the whole bed, and it was a mess. The doctor on call got called in. My room turned into an operating room, X-ray, CAT scan, or MRI, whatever it was. And then they're constantly moving you and shifting you. If you can imagine your belly being like a bowl full of, it hurt like hell. You're just in severe pain, your whole body. And aside from your whole body being in excruciating pain, you're mentally in pain. Still haven't seen your baby. You're just, I don't know how to describe it except to be in a black hole.
How could you not?
You have no control. You're just at the mercy of all these medical experts and everything, but they took care of me, and I was not internally bleeding like they were maybe afraid of, and eventually got put into post-op. They moved me, so I had more continuous care, because they've got, two that are in charge of it all times. So they're monitoring you much closer.
So Mindy, where did the healing process begin for you? How did it begin?
Well, once I got home, really though, I think the healing process started, I'll have to say, when I had that vision, the healing process started. That would be the little burst of light, I think, because that would be my beacon. that just the thought of that is the beacon. So that would probably be the start. And then I just started believing more I've always been intrigued in the unknown and the mystical realm, always. And I've always kind of studied it here or there for fun, but was never so invoked to really kind of awaken, So doing the research and reading and getting out in nature and connection is really where I began to heal.
And when did you start to feel that universal presence, that light and love that you talk about, that you now know is with you all the time and always has been?
Well, again, the vision, and then, I had a tremendous support system, and so they were always there helping, and just the connection with them and the love and energy I felt from them, just made me think about things differently, and even looking at them differently. It's like I started to analyze everything a little deeper, not necessarily more, it was deeper.
I think you opened your heart to receive love differently.
I think so, yes. Because I remember one of my nurses that came, because of course I had to have follow-up care once I came home, and her and I, because I shared that story with her, and she said, "Is it okay if I say a prayer for you?" And she did, and right after she said that prayer, she because she was holding my hand the whole time, but it was like a different vibration all of a sudden. And she said, "I know that you," and she had her eyes closed too the whole time. She said, "I know you turned your back on God at one point, but he's never turned his back on you. And you know that now, don't you?" And I remember saying, "Yes, I do." And, oh, it was almost like she was a host for a second, And she was telling me that he'll always be there to guide you and to love you, and that, even though we go through dark times, he's always present. And to remember that. And then, the cool part was, of course, we started to talk again after that. And she was telling me how she has connected with spirits, So that made me, because she used to work for hospice. And she quit doing it because it got to be too much. It was draining her. But she's almost like a vessel, I think, then, because she would get sort of messages from, the outside realm, right? When the other family was dying, or the family member was dying, and, the family members, she said it was always, they would hang on and they would hold on until that last person finally came that they needed to see or talk to,
Wow.
you know. And she said there were times that they would just be so aggressive about seeing this one particular person. And she said I'd have to kind of look them up sometimes or ask one of the other family members, hey, where's Uncle John, or, you know, whoever. And then, of course, that other family member would be like, why? And because, you know, this, you know,
And
because they
Mindy,
were almost sort of,
you called in your own guardian angel.
isn't that cool? I mean, so I've just, as I've gone along on this journey, I keep, and then even meeting you on Facebook through Divine Mommy when I was, you know, feeling really low because my marriage was just totally on the rocks and I was losing him, you know. I just needed to reach out and find, I wasn't even sure, but some kind of support or something. And so I remember reaching out to you. And I'm so glad I did.
I'm glad you did too. So with all of this, you're taking all of these experiences and it's in your heart to help other women.
Yes. Yes.
Can you talk about what this passion is to start a birth trauma
Well,
group?
I have been studying ever since, you know, that whole experience. Even though I had my dark days, I would just throw myself into a book or some kind of documentary or something, and that would, you know, inspire me to learn more. And then I got inspired to help other women, and I was thinking about doing a group for just birth traumas, just for moms who suffered birth traumas. And I never did get a chance to do that because I just wasn't in the right place. It wasn't the right time. We ended up moving up to North Carolina for a short time. So that changed. But now being back in Florida and around the people and you and everybody, my life is changing too. Gonna get a divorce. There's gonna be a new chapter in my life. And it just sort of seems to be all coming together, because I've been trusting the universe. I keep saying to myself when I have the dark days, I'm just gonna let it play out. I've got to go through these flows and waves of feelings and emotions, and eventually this is all gonna play out. There's some kind of purpose here. There's lessons I'm learning for sure, and I'm absorbing it all. And I definitely want to give back. So my goal is to start some kind of group and help others. I've even thought about being a doula and specializing in aftercare. You know, not necessarily being in the room. I could do that too, but I think my main scope would be just helping to keep mom and dad together and the family connected and together, and, you know, just getting through that darkness and giving them the tools, you know, to know how.
Wow, honey, just listening to you talk about transforming that experience into a way to help other families, it's so inspirational. Thank you, Mindy. Thank you for trusting me with your story and for being a part of the book and for doing this interview and for always being so ready to be so authentic, because just listening to you talk about where you've been, where you are, and where you're headed, that is so healing for all of us. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Everybody say a little prayer for me too to get to the end of all this.
You know it, Mama. We are all in your corner, I promise. That's what we've got, right? We've got each other.
Yes, yes.
That's right.
Empowered in numbers.
That's right.
Women need each other for sure.
Ajna to ajna, heart to heart.
Men are scared when you get together too. Some, not all.
Right? We want to empower ourselves enough that we invite the masculine to join us in that space.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, honey, I love you. I'm so glad that you sent me that email, 3 years ago, 2 years
3
ago?
years ago.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, it's
I,
been 3 years. Valentine's.
yep. I look forward to seeing what's next.
Me too.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
I can't wait for just the healing energy of what you've shared in this interview to just work its magic and get shared and listened to and processed in such a heartfelt way, so that other women who have gone through similar situations, or even just maybe not a similar situation but felt similar feelings, can say, oh my gosh, I'm not alone.
Yes, that's the most important part, is to not feel alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching.